And we're live and welcome, friends and fellow seekers. And today, my guest is Miss Brownell Landrum. Brownell is the author of a new book, The Art and Science of Wishing, and also the founder of the Cosmic Wish Experiment. And Brownell is also an author of over a dozen books, both fiction and nonfiction, including Five Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, the Hero's Playbook. I'm really interested in that one. The We Meet Again Trilogy, A Love Story to the Universe, and more. The motto for her novels is lose yourself in the fiction, find yourself in the truth. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. So my first question is, what is the science of wishing?
It's fascinating, and it's something that I want to kind of give the whole framework so that listeners understand who I am and where I came from and like how all this kind of came to be, because I'm not a scientist. So I want to set that up from the beginning. This all kind of occurred when I was writing my most recent novel called A Love Story to the Universe. And I decided to write this kind of magical world, I call it upstairs, and where wishes are gathered and sorted and granted, and how wishing works from the level of what I call the upstairs. So it's kind of a magical realism, kind of story. And as I was writing it, I had to define, like if you know about any fiction writers, we have to define the world building, right? And so like I had to think, well, what is a wish and how are wishes processed and how does all that work? And then being a little bit of a science geek on the side, one night while I was writing that or right after, I was listening to a science lecture and on neuroplasticity. And I was thinking, wait a minute, is there science in wishing? It just started this kind of quest to figure out, is there science in wishing? And it turned into like this game of science whack-a-mole. It's like, yes, anthropology, sociology, psychology, quantum physics, like all of these sciences. And so I just started researching and just got fascinated by the whole concept of, and I had to define, what is a wish? What is the difference between a wish, a prayer, and a goal? How do wishes work? Ended up with quoting over 70 different scientists. So I always say if somebody's listening and they know more about science than I do, bring it on. Like I want to learn more, right? I want to make it better. I do like the fact that because my perspective, I could quote a lot of scientists and look at it from a lot of points of view, as opposed to if I was like just a neuroscientist, then I would only kind of have that perspective. And now I can look at it from like every possible angle. But that's led, I mean, there's over every time you make a wish, you engage over a dozen different sciences. I mean, it's mind blowing. So that's led to the book.
So the one that really stood out to me that you mentioned science-wise is neuroplasticity. And that's something that I've been very interested in over the years. And the idea that the brain actually just rewires itself based upon new information. It's changing itself biologically, physically, based upon new information coming into it. And to me, the idea is very much, it's one of those moments where science seems to validate something that ancient wisdom has said in various ways, that you create your mind. It starts with your mind creating your reality, or Christ says, the kingdom of heaven is within, and things like this. And philosopher that I'm really interested in is G.I. Gurdjieff, who said famously that impressions are food. In other words, that even the images and the ideas that we get are like a kind of food that comes in, and it can provide nourishment, or it can make us sick in a completely mental kind of way. So that's definitely something that I resonate with very much. So your book, The Art and Science of Wishing, is there a certain that you can summarize a certain approach or program that you offer in the book that helps us to kind of maybe maximize our ability of dealing with this sort of
Yeah,
phenomena?
Absolutely. It basically starts out and says, make a wish, right? Imagine you're blowing out candles on a birthday cake or you're throwing a coin into a fountain. What would you wish for? And then it takes you through the process of turning your wish into what I call a cosmic wish. And the difference between a wish and a cosmic wish, and you probably love this in terms of the definition of the word cosmic, it starts out with the universe, right? The vastness of the universe. That's the first part of the definition of Merriam-Webster. The second is that it ventures into the metaphysical / spiritual arena. And the third part of the definition is that it is comprehensive. So if you can imagine, you take a wish, which we just kind of throw them away, right? We just kind of like put them out there and let them go. But if you add that kind of definition to a cosmic wish, basically my kind of message is the more you learn the science, the more you can turn it into a cosmic wish. I set up even before that the difference between a wish, a prayer, and a goal, right? And a goal is something you have control over, right? I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to go to this place. You can set up a plan to do that. That's in your control. And a prayer is usually something way outside your control. Like, I can't do anything about this. Let me pray and let the whatever higher power or dimension handle it. And a wish is somewhere in between, right? It's a kind of this beautiful space in between. But the more you learn about the science, the more you realize even that, quote, metaphysical area in the middle of the definition of cosmic becomes more scientific. I like Max Planck talked about, there should be no division between religion and science. The more you can bring them together, the more powerful you are. And I'm paraphrasing him, but, I can't remember.
Mhm.
There should be no opposition or something like that was his actual quote. And he also says the mind is the matrix of all matter, which goes back to your earlier point, right? And he was the founder of quantum physics, as I'm sure most of your listeners already know. So the more you understand the science, the more you can bring your wishes inside of your control. And so that's kind of the theme. And so I start with the anthropology of it, and this was kind of obvious, but it's one of those brilliant grasps of the obvious, like, once you think about it, it's probably true, but you didn't really think about it that way, is that collective wishing rituals have been a key driver of survival since the dawn of humanity. People getting together and having the same wish. And I know enough about watching your show to know that that has a power, and that magnifies a power beyond our own ability to just say, oh, I wish for this to happen. I wish for more peaceful, positive, and purposeful candidates to win the election. What if everybody's wishing that? What if more people and more, it's hundreds and thousands of maybe millions? There's real power in that.
So, do you make a distinction or do you talk about like different qualities of wish? Say, I can have a wish for, and maybe you already said this, I can wish for something very, very, very basic and within reach, like I want to lose weight, or I wish, oh, or maybe I wish so and so would pay attention to me, you know,
Right.
or things like that. We can wish for things that are temporal, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Or then there's also this experience that some people talk about, that a sort of this deeper kind of wish for being, wish for life or harmony or something like that within being, that is not transient. Like, even if I got together with 100 people, I said let's like wish in, like, different political candidates or whatever, maybe we'd be successful with that. But then there's going to be that candidate's going to go away anyhow, and there's going to be another. It's still like a temporal, like, kind of thing that I'm going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of or a lot of answers within your question and a lot of questions within your question. And yes, the book goes much more specific in the actual energy of making the wish, and then how the best way to frame your wish, and then to weave it back to neuroplasticity. And this is, I think, what a lot of people miss. I know I did in my wishing, is to engage the neuroplasticity in order to actually change the brain. And this is, again, according to science, is it has to be repeated over a period of time. And so when you're talking about temporal, you're talking about, first of all, that you have to do it repeatedly just for maybe a minute every day. But you have to repeat it over an 8-week period to really change the brain. And then also your wish should be framed within that time period. Right? In other words, over the next 8 weeks, I would like to see my family be more in harmony,
Hmm.
right? I'd love to see my parents get along better if you're a child, right? Or I'd love to see positive action toward protecting the environment, right? It
Mhm.
can be huge or it can be personal, right? It can be, as big as you might want it. And what happens is during those times, and I'll get back to like how to wish, right? The energy behind the wish. But what's fascinating, the way the brain works, and I know you probably know the reticular activating system and all these kinds of things that help your brain, is that it's going to seek a solution. When it's repeated like that, it's going to keep seeking a solution. And then you've got collective people, and then you've got a lot of people seeking a solution. Before you know it, it's like when a friend says, "Will you help me with, me getting this next job?" And you're like, "I can't help you with that job." And then all of a sudden, the more you think about it, and the more you think about it, you're like, "But I do know somebody who knows somebody who works there." Right?
Mhm.
Or I do know this other aspect, or maybe I can help you with your resume because I, did this. And all of a sudden, whether it's 6 degrees of separation or something that you really didn't immediately think of, the more you kind of repeat that wish, the more you're going to be able to accomplish it. Does that make sense?
And that reflection on it makes me think of the Thousand and One Nights, right? The classic Middle Eastern mythological collection, which is like where we get the genie in a bottle,
Right.
the genie in the bottle trope of like you've got three wishes, and all these stories are all about, oh, you got three wishes. You know what, you need to think about it, because the people that like, oh, I know what I want right away. I know what I want right away, and lock themselves into this wish, they end up having a hard time. So there's this adage: be careful what you wish for. You just might get it.
That's
And I
right.
need to reflect on what I'm wishing for, and what it could mean. Is that something that you've talked about or that you've explored in the book about like the consequences of wishing and that sort of thing?
1,000%. The longest chapter in the book are the 4 responses to a wish, right? And it's either yes, and you get what you want, no, and or wait, or something better, right? Those are usually the 4 responses, but yes isn't always the right one. So you may say, like you said at the beginning, somebody, "Oh, I wish that I get more attention from this person," right? Maybe it's, "I want somebody who really loves me." Right? That's a
Mhm.
big difference because that person might not be who's best for you.
Mhm.
And what you really want is love. So there's a whole part also, and there's a whole chapter on motivation, and there's a whole chapter on the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious, because how those weigh into your wish. But the motivation is to look at what you want versus what you need.
Mhm.
I even bring in Luke Skywalker or Elle Woods, if you know Legally Blonde, one of those movies. Luke wanted adventure and to hang out with his friends, right? He
Mhm.
needed to find his purpose,
Mhm.
right? So if he had wished for hanging out with his friends, and he ultimately did have some friends in the final battle or whatever, and he met new friends, but he needed to find his purpose, right? Elle Woods wanted to marry, if you know that movie, wanted to marry Warner. What she needed was to learn how to stand on her own, right? So movies do a really beautiful job of that, but we also need to know, and I know the Rolling Stones, of course, sang about that. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes when you have to look at your wish, you think, what's the need behind the want?
Mhm.
So the person that says, I wish I'd hear more back from this other person, they really want to feel loved. Or somebody says, I want $1 million. Maybe what they really want is money for their child's education.
Right.
So getting to the need is a big part of it. And then understanding the nuances of the 4 responses, because no is just maybe not, it may be either wait or it's more information. Like, okay, I didn't hear from that person, but that isn't who I wanted anyway. Once I learned more, our brain fills in the gaps of all the little things that we think we want out of that one thing. And there's something else. And the book gets into that too. So there's a lot of elements of that.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned Luke in there, because then there's probably a lot more things that we can find good analogies to as we
Yeah.
go through this. One thing that I see, let's see what you think about this. One thing that I see is there's sort of a movement from specificity into more less specificity. Not generality is not really the word I'm looking for, but it's like that that initial wish of I want, and you said this with you know I want specifically that person, and then something about we start out being really specific about what we want with things, and what I'm really wishing for, which is where I think, yeah, this that urge for wish is something that arises, something much deeper. We have some more deeper primal urge or wish for being or existence. And the same thing happens with magic, is what I was going to note also, is that that same process happens with magic, with people who are practicing magic, that people start out, trying to cast spells to get really specific things. I want this job, I want that person to like me, and then they get a little bit like older, a little more experienced, and they start to like kind of like not be so specific about things. Like I want to be happy, I want to have harmony and things like that. So, how much of your understanding of wish, how much does this connect with what I was talking about as far as like magic or ceremonial magic or something like that? Is there any parallels with there or connections that you see?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about the whole concept of wishes and wishing, first of all, everybody does it all over the world. And everybody of different religions, non-religion. I even have a really fun chapter in the book about fun with skeptics,
Hmm.
because people might be skeptical and you're like, yeah, but here's the science. And then all of a sudden the skeptics start paying attention. So that's that when you add the science to it. So one of the things I love about it though is that you can come from any religion and it still resonates, or no religion and it resonates. You can come from I mean, if you're a total cynic, you're
Hmm.
never going to, you're just going to be contrarian. But if you're skeptical but open, then, then it can fit into, if your framework is magic or it's Wicca or it's Christianity or it's, really kind of any framework, you can use the same principles within that world. So if you're conjuring spells or magic and you learn, okay, well, wait a minute, if I do this, and, I don't know if it's about specificity, that's the word. I don't know if it's about that, because you could say, okay, why do I want this person? Because I like the way he or she does this, 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 and this, and I want somebody who does those things. You can be specific in that regard, but you can learn the framework to put it all within. Like one of the things I talked about was how to make the wish, and I kind of alluded to it, but I call it the three P's. And so while you're making your wish, the three P's are important. And that is, first aspect, you're peaceful. So you're coming from a grounded place, you're coming from a peaceful place. And the science behind that is so fun and cool, right? Why that matters. And so it's not I want harm to this person or whatever it is. It's like, no, you're peaceful and calm. The second one is that you're positive. So you're wishing for something, not against something. So it's, I don't want this, or I want this negative thing to happen. It's like, what's the positive thing that you want happen? So being positive about it, and also positive in your kind of energy of believing in it. And then the third part is purposeful. And when you take it to purposeful, then you are elevating the wish, right? And so then it's okay, I'm not just wishing for me, I'm wishing for something that's good for more than me. So even if it's, I wish for that particular person, which I keep circling back to, is if it's best for both of us and if it's what's best for everyone. And then when you come from that point of view, whether you're using magic, whether you're casting spells, whether you're praying, whatever, when you're doing it that way, the science, again, this is not me just telling you my opinion. The 70 scientists in the book, so you can imagine I look at it from every angle. That's what makes it stronger. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, dude, that's great. I love the three P's. I think that's great. Peaceful, positive, purposeful. I mean, that's just good advice for living too. I like that. So
Yeah, if
that's
even
a
if
good
all I
takeaway.
did was get people to start being more peaceful, positive, and purposeful for 1 minute a day, that could change the world. That
Hmm.
simple thing for 1 minute every day, whatever their wish is, they can tag that on to their wish, or that can be their wish. I mean, I think, and if children from now till forever started making their wishes that way, so they're blowing out their candles on the birthday cake, and they're, okay, I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to be purposeful. That could make a big difference. I know I'm overinflating my importance, but I do think it could.
No, I think you're onto something there. And I also wanted to ask, is the upstairs, you use this term, the upstairs, is that like a higher self, a higher part of your consciousness?
Yeah, again, my novels definitely venture into the metaphysical, right? This book says if you, and it does talk about the three selves, and the fact that there's a higher self, or whether you want to call it super conscious and use Jung, or super ego and use Freud, whichever framework, and you can use a scientific definition of that, or you can use a spiritual definition of it. in my novels, I definitely get into the spiritual slash metaphysical. So, in that particular book, it's written in 4 parts. The 4th part is the part that gets into this world that I call Astrea, and that's a famous Greek goddess, maybe not so famous, but anyway, Greek goddess about truth and justice. And I thought that was a pretty
Mm,
name for also means star, so I thought that that was a pretty name for that world. And the first parts definitely get into it's from the point of view of the upstairs. So the upstairs is looking at humans going, "What are you doing? What are you doing? How are we gonna try to, trying to do it from that perspective?" So I like getting into that myself, and I also like in the book and the science, like, even if you don't that's not your jam, you can still understand there is a higher part of us. We know what that feels like.
mhm.
Yeah.
No, I think that's like really significant. That's something that is just one of the big recurring themes on my show has been this idea of what the Greek, you mentioned the Greeks, what the Greeks called the daimon, that, Socrates and Plato and all these, Aristotle, all of them believed in this idea. And all these other ancient civilizations did too. And even, I mean, all of our religions believe, even the gospels talk about, Christ talks about the paraclete and Holy Spirit and these things like that. So this is like one of these really old ideas that I mean, everyone used to know about, but in modern Western civilization, we've really kind of lost it. And as far as like mainstream knowledge, we've kind of lost our connection with that. Even though, like you made good points that psychology like talks about some kind of like higher kind of thing. But I guess what I'm saying is that these is like the way you see it in these other civilizations, these other systems, like, the Greek and Zoroastrian and stuff, that it's like, well, it's even more than just like, it's more than just getting smarter. It's kind of a fundamentally, qualitatively different aspect of our existence that we forget about. And then it doesn't do anything, but we remember it. And it has this power to really, it's a real game changer. Like with the house. And then when you talk about upstairs and downstairs, it's like if we live in a if our mind body complex is envisioned as a house, which is kind of like the aim of that analogy, and it's like our upstairs, there's a room up there that we forgot about, and we
Right.
never go there anymore.
Right. Right, and and I think you'd actually really enjoy my We Meet Again novels because it's an epic reincarnation mystery about a famous couple from history who's reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that'll fill the world, that'll change the world or save the world. And it goes back, it's a reincarnation mystery, so it goes back to these previous lifetimes. But a little bit of a spoiler, but it goes back all the way to to Pythagoras.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he was like the man. I mean, like, because Socrates and Aristotle and Plato all followed Pythagoras. Like he was,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
he kind of started that whole aspect, and more learning about him and his world. And like, there's a temple in Rome that was found like 100 years ago that was hidden for 2,000 years, and all the stuff about that. So I love getting into how did that set the framework for so many other things. And he knew the planets were spheres. Like, that wasn't the surprise back to him 2,500 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he also talked about the harmony of the spheres and the music that happens. I guarantee, I mean, I think he was, like, really channeling some pretty amazing stuff, and when you think about from that long ago and what is still around from him, most people just know about the triangles.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Pythagorean theorem, and all even, my nephew's a, math teacher, and I said, "Did you know that Pythagoras's father was a gem cutter?"
Mm.
Well, no wonder he knew the triangles. He knew
Mm-hmm.
math and geometry
Mm-hmm.
because that's
Mm.
what he learned it from his dad. So I just think it's fun to go back all that far and look at some of that history. I agree.
And Pythagoras he was captured as a slave in Babylon, and he spent all this time in Babylon. And so there's also this theory, right? Of course, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you what I read. But he
Yeah.
went to Babylon, and so there in the time period when he came back is when I can't remember. I don't think it was Cyrus the Great. Like Cyrus the Great was definitely Zoroastrian. At the time when the Hebrews were captured in Babylon, it was definitely during this time when it was a Zoroastrian empire. Then Pythagoras comes back with these ideas like, and you're right. It's like all of the Greek philosophers, like, Plato talks about like they're talking about the forms and principles and stuff like that. And Pythagoras came back. It's like, well, yeah, that comes from Pythagoras. It's like numbers.
Right.
Mathematics are like the principles of the universe and stuff. So yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting how we find ourselves following back this line of knowledge that it sounds you're tapping into pretty heavily. We Meet Again. That's the name of the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The
It's a trilogy. So,
trilogy.
and I'm not gonna give away who the famous couple was, but that was really fascinating to get into that world and rethink that, and so it was, so it's kind of like a Da Vinci Code meets Outlander kind of love story thing that uses the reincarnation message within that. So, anyway, when you
Well,
mentioned the ancient Greeks and everything, I thought, yeah, that was fun studying that and his whole philosophy about, what his and I know the Rosicrucians are very much following the Pythagorean philosophy, so that's what's fun to start looking at how all that fits together.
also, he invented, well, didn't invent, but I think is the first known usage of the pentagram, five-pointed star, as the symbol of his academy.
Yeah, I did
So
not know that.
yeah,
See,
right,
I love
because
learning.
it's
Yeah,
it's the phi ratio and the mathematics that are in it. And so I think then in culture, then next you talk about Da Vinci does that famous man
right.
image using that symbol. So many sources where you see that pentagram being used nowadays is probably lost connection with Pythagoras to some extent. But yeah, he's responsible. It's just this one guy like is responsible for so much stuff.
Well, and it's funny if you look at what his cave was where he did all his teachings in Samos, and you can go now with the internet. I wanted to go there when I was overseas, but I didn't quite get there yet. But I'm like, there's no way that was his real cave. So like they're sending you like when you start learning some things that what you're taught in history, you're like, this is the way it is. And the famous couple, I'm just gonna tell you, was a famous writer and from the Middle Ages and clearly an unreliable narrator. So the more you learn, you're like, people are saying this is the way it is. Like, no, 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 you have to put it in the context. Like, there's more to it than that. It's incredible. But no, it's not like it gets a whole lot of visitors. So
Uh,
it's fun to do into that. But anyway, I know I went off on tangent, but when you mentioned all of that, I thought you'd appreciate that part of the story.
Uh, No, definitely. I love that. I love tangents. And I wanted to ask, this is something I wanted to ask from the very beginning,
Yeah.
your thoughts about reincarnation, because I know you've done a lot with that in the past, obviously. And it's something, for me, just to tell you, it's something that I had used to not look into, that I used to kind of dismiss the possibility of this. But what got me thinking more about it is the idea of pre-soul or pre-existence, which I really encountered through looking at Zoroastrianism. But then I find, well, no, that was out there too. There's even little
Yeah.
references you can find in the Bible about this possibility. And so if we have an existence before and an existence afterwards, if we have an existence afterwards, then it seems logical that we have an existence before as well, because the same qualities of a soul or consciousness that would go on after that would could just as easily go on before it.
Right.
And that opens the door to previous lives. If you could just tell me a little bit more, what are your thoughts about reincarnation? How do you see it all
Well,
working out?
there's a bunch of different answers to that. One is Pythagoras was a big believer, and therefore Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were. I personally believe that it's highly probable that during the time of Christ it was a known thing. Like it wasn't even a question thing. And so then you put all that into a different context. And I think when people say about Christianity, Jesus is coming again, I'm like, isn't that what they're saying?
Yeah.
I mean, how else is that gonna
Yeah.
happen within the framework of what we know as physics? Like, there's no other answer. And I like what Voltaire said, is like, it's not any more surprising that we'd be born multiple times than once, you know?
Mhm.
So it's more logical that we would have more than one life. I mean, it just makes more sense that because some
Mhm.
people have short lives, some people have long lives, but if we had a variety. So, I'm not gonna try to convince anybody one way or the other. I just find it fascinating, and I feel like it explains more. And as a writer, I love writing it. right? I love writing people that meet now, and then how did they know each other before, and then how did they know each other before that, and how does that all weave into the dynamic of why we're here? And I also love the fact that, and I think this is kind of an important aspect of reincarnation, is that if you start realizing that you've been other races before and other nationalities and other religions, then how can you be racist or nationalist or, anti somebody's religion? Because you probably, or socioeconomic levels. You've probably been rich and you've probably been poor, and you've made mistakes probably on
Yeah.
all of them, right? To me,
Hmm.
that's the great unifier, is that it doesn't mean you're superior or inferior.
Right.
And, I mean, whether, again, if the people don't believe, that's fine. It's still fun to write about from a fictional standpoint.
Yeah. Have you ever read that Yogananda autobiography of a yogi?
I was thinking that's where you're going. Yeah. I never have read that book.
So, just one scenario that he mentions in there is he talks um, about a vision of like life in the astral plane and how like everyone is there, and it's all people who've like already everyone has like been through 1,000 lives, everyone has been through this, and so all of the like anger and jealousy and all of these things that plague us while we're here on this world, are not there. It just automatically just like kind of falls away, and that kind of sense that he conveys, and I don't know how true anything he says is, but the sense which he conveys uh, really had a profound effect on me.
Hmm.
And there's a part in the Gospels which gets into this where people are asking Jesus, well, what about, you say there's this afterlife, so what about if a guy's married to this woman and then she dies and he marries another woman and then blah blah blah. Well, what happens in the afterlife, right? When
Right.
all these you get there and all of your ex-wives and ex-girlfriends and ex-partners are all there at the same time. How's that going to work out? It sounds like a difficult situation. And so his response is that, which I can't repeat right now, just that it's more similar of the sense of what I was describing from Yogananda. You have to
Right.
understand it's not in the same world. There's something about our existence here in this world that gives us the sense that we got to take all we can, and that we're being possessive of things.
Yes, the survival of the fittest of this planet, I think, is the kind of the framework. I talk about that in my first book, The 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, right? Is that, that this planet is designed with this whole mentality of survival of the fittest. And it says if you're mentally, physically, or intellectually stronger, you're going to survive over those that are weaker, which makes sense, right? If you're designing a planet, that makes sense. The challenge is that it also leads to what I call social Darwinism, which is somebody needing to put someone else down so that they can feel strong. And so that's where evil comes from. That's when you're separating yourself from that higher part you were mentioning, and you're just living on this physical plane. And so when you start realizing there's more to it, then you can be that person, like I call it spiritual Darwinism, which is you're going to get a message not to get on that plane that's going to crash, right? You're going to get some sort of guidance not to go into that relationship or not to wish for this, to bring it back to wishing, right? You're going to kind of have a much clearer angle. And when you're at that purposeful part of the wishing, then you're connecting to that part of you that's going to give you that kind of wisdom, so that you're not just coming, because I do talk about the three selves, right? A lot in terms of wishing. And so you've got to integrate those parts. And you'll like this, I think, when you're talking about one of the things that was a big, like eureka moment for me when I was writing that book was when I realized the body is the subconscious. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I can communicate with that. I understand what that is. The body has its own wishes and its own things it wants and its own motivations. And the best analogy I like to use with, how the mind and body works is, for most people, just imagine you see a neighbor and he's walking his dog and the dog runs off. What does he usually do? I'm asking, what do you
Chase after it.
he either yells at it or chases after it, right? And that doesn't usually work out very well. But if he said, "Come on, it's fun over here," the dog's gonna go, "Yay, I'm gonna go there."
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's how we need to be with our bodies. Like, instead of yelling at it for doing something the wrong way, let's make it fun, bring them back into the game, and we're working together on this. That is all of a sudden now we've got an integration from the mind and the body.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, that 100% that makes sense. So there's a lot in there. I was going to
Yeah.
say that when you mentioned that there is a higher sort of like aspect to how the mind relates to the body, and I think that oh, and that there's a guidance, a wish for like this sort of guidance, and I think a lot of people, and this is definitely the case with myself, that a real serious kind of more substantial sort of guidance appeared after, as a result of sort of bringing integrating the body into it. And for me, that was through meditation
Yes.
practice, that sort of brought that in there. The body, it's like the dog analogy is so good because I'm an owner of Dobermans, like work
Okay.
dogs, right? And
Yeah.
so these like dogs, they need to be given something to do because they got all this energy. They need a job to do, right? So you have to work with them and train them. And people who get dogs like this, where it's the same with like German Shepherds, other big work dogs like that. If you get a dog like this and you don't really train it or work with it, then it becomes a problem, right?
Right.
A dog will probably become a problem.
Right.
It'll get into stuff, and so then people have problems. And the body is kind of similar kind of thing. If we don't work with it, if we don't give it like we want guidance here, but give our body like some guidance on things, then our body just like goes and it succumbs to mischief. It ends up doing getting into bad things and getting us in trouble. And the passions and the desires and the appetites end up controlling it because it doesn't have guidance for anything higher. And
And
our mind.
And if you
Oh,
don't allow it the opportunity to have fun and enjoy things, then I mean, I think we all know the experience of like we ate a donut and we don't even remember eating it, right? And it's like the body takes over. I'm going to sneak at this in. You're not paying attention. I'm going to eat, and then you don't even enjoy it. So it's much better to say, okay, if I'm going to eat this donut, I'm going to enjoy every bite. I mean, we're going to be immersive in enjoying that donut. And then the body is going to go, okay, I'm doing this with permission. I don't have to sneak it. We're together on this. I can eat this donut. And generally the body won't even care about eating the donut. It's
mhm.
about being getting some pleasures, and it works really well with, and I think your Doberman probably is a really good example in terms of, and I'd never had one, but I know enough to know how they can be very disciplined and they can be very good at following rules if you give them the right structure, right? And so can the body. So if, let's say, you're working on a big project or big task, and if you can say to the body, if you say, I'm just going to do this, your body might be distracted all over the place, right? But if you say, look, we're going to do this and let's make it fun and say, if we can get this done by noon, then we're going to go do something fun this afternoon. Body's like, okay, I'm paying attention. I'm not distracted. We're focusing on this because I want to do that fun thing this afternoon. And in fact, you mentioned that I have the cosmic wish experiment. And one of the activities that's within that whole concept is to spend a week just getting to know your body and asking permission. What do you want to do today? I even like, I don't know if you know much about the Huna religion. Are you familiar at all with that?
I don't think so.
It's a Polynesian religion. We've all heard the Big Kahuna, right?
Oh yeah.
And the Big Kahuna is the head of the Huna tribe. So that's where the context comes.
Oh, okay.
But it's basically psychology 101. What I like about it though is that the thing that, and it's very much about the conscious, subconscious, superconscious. And the thing I like about it says to name your body. So you have a name for your body. So you can say, it's not going to be Paul,
Mm.
right? And it's probably not going to be something you think. So you have to ask him what it is. And then he'll tell you. And it may be, Heracles. I mean, it might be something really crazy. But when you do, you're going to resonate with that. He's going to be happy that you heard that name. And then you can say, what are we going to do today? What do you want to eat today? Like, give it him, them, whatever, give them that kind of communication. And one thing that happened to me after getting to know my body like that was the, like my friend said, you're interesting to watch eat because you're paying attention to every bite. You're consciously eating every bite. And so when you start bringing those things to the conscious, then you all of a sudden everything is starting to work better together. So there's my little 2 cents on that.
That's great. A lot of what you said makes me think of the idea of presence, of trying to be more present. And that, in one sense, it really means the body. It means an awareness of that because the body is always present. Your body is
Right.
never not present. The mind can be, flying off, dreaming about the future or, ruminating over the past, but the body is always present. So learning to make that sort of connection with the body is like an anchor that can always kind of be there to pull us back into the present. And so it's a very valuable thing. And I did not know that about the Huna, naming your body. That sounds like very interesting. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, I've talked to some psychologists and they're like, that's brilliant to separate the selves, right? To have that kind of distinguished and it's really, really fun to do. I will give you a
Interesting.
warning though, if you do it, then you gotta pay attention. Because a friend of mine, I talked to her about it and she kind of immediately knew the name of her body. For her, it happened to be her imaginary friend as a kid. Like that was how it all tied together. And then she calls me a couple of weeks later and she's like, "These weird things are happening." And I said, "What is it?" And she's like, "I know I locked the front door. I wake up the next morning, the front door's wide open. Not just unlocked, but wide open. And I know I set the alarm and the alarm is not going off." And I said, "She's getting your attention." And so you can't ignore once you open that door, you gotta kind of be ready to have that communication because they can be mischievous.
Wow.
I thought that was too funny, but it's true. It can happen.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's where, like, when I talk about the 5 reasons why bad things happen, one of the reasons is subconscious sabotage. Your body will sabotage you. Like another friend was going to she was a workaholic and she was gonna work all Labor Day weekend one year, and she goes out to get some, takeout food. She comes out of the restaurant, trips over the curb, and twists her ankle, and she's in bed all weekend. I mean, that's her body going, "No, you're not gonna work all weekend, and if I have to do this so I can rest, I will do this." I mean, it can work to that level. But if she had said, "Look, I'm gonna work all day Saturday, we get this done, and then Sunday we're gonna have a blast and go do something really fun," the body would have totally paid attention.
Right.
Mm.
Wow. And so now this is one of the 5 reasons why things go bad or why bad things happen.
Right.
This is something that I did want to ask you about too.
Yeah.
So can you go through those for us like real quick?
Well, I'm not sure I wanna spoil them all, but I will give
Okay.
you, I will give you, more, and I'll give you the big thing that they all have in common, because that's kind of the most important thing, is that they all are designed to get you to change something. They're all designed so if you're going down a particular path and sometimes I look at the spirit guides like border collies, and sometimes they'll whack you aside to keep you in line, and you wanna go this way, and it wants you to go that way, and sometimes it has to keep hitting you, and you might get sore on the side. I mean, but the 5 things, and like subconscious sabotage is a good example, is it's trying to get you to do something different. It's trying to send you in another direction. And when you start realizing that these things are happening for that reason, whatever the bad thing is, then it can, then you can start looking at it, reframing it. I don't talk about this actual phrase in that book because it's a newer thing that I came up with, but I do talk about it in the art and science of wishing is a concept I call reverse optimism, where we can look back and go, that happened because that happened because that happened because that got me here, right? And if those
Mhm.
things hadn't happened, even though they were hard or painful or difficult, that's why I got here. That's a very powerful tool to use when you're looking back at things that happen. And then while things are happening now and they may not be maybe difficult, if you can think, what do I need to change? Then it can propel you in a much better direction.
Yeah. Reverse optim. I'm very familiar with that, but I didn't have a good word for it. So thanks. That's
You can use that now. Just
right. I
remember
see
me
that
when you
happening.
do.
Yeah. How can listeners apply this wishing technology to their New Year's intentions? Because it's coming up real fast.
It's coming up real fast. There's a few different answers to that. Of course, my book is available for just basic people to buy and read. I also am launching the Cosmic Wish Experiment. And for that, the goal is to start creating what are called wish circles. So it's people getting together, and it could be 2 or 3 people, it could be 2 or 3 thousand people, but somebody would lead that circle. They would create a wish circle, name it, and then invite their friends to join this wish circle. And then they would come up with their own ritual because the ritual is important, whether it's seeing 11:11 on the clock or whether it's every time you see a yellow car or whatever kind of ritual. That's important because you can imagine if you've got a circle and everybody's wishing at the same time or wishing at the same experience, then you've got a kind of a unification there. If somebody wants to start a wish circle, they go to cosmicwishexperiment.com. And I'm calling it an experiment for a reason. As I said, I'm not a scientist. We're learning this. We're going to keep making it better. But they can sign up for that, and then if they do, it's all completely fun and free and simple. So it's all laid out for you. You get a free playbook with these activities that I was mentioning. And so once you sign up, and you could sign up for your listeners, and they could all you could decide on your collective wish. You would have a group wish, and then each person can have an individual wish during the 8-week period. And there's a tracker, and there's gamification and points and scoring and all that kind of good fun stuff. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's really, really cute. And there's also merch if people want teddy bears with Make a Cosmic Wish and all that
Uh,
kind of all that kind of stuff. And my goal is really, I mean, to elevate wishing and elevate this world. And so I am, full disclosure, I am approving the wishes. So if somebody's wishing for something dark or negative, I either won't approve it or I will help them reframe it to elevate it to something better to fit the three P's because the three P's are a big principle of it. But that whole
right.
thing is all free. And the book is optional. I mean, obviously, I love it when people want it, but I'm not charging anything for the Cosmic Wish experiment. That's all my gift.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. So this is where, and can people find all, links and get to all of your other books and everything through that, through cosmicwishexperiment.com?
They would probably be to find all my books because I don't, it's not like a heavy self-promotion site. It's more about what the experiment's about. But you can look me up, Brownell Landrum. I've got brownelllandrum.com, and I'm the only Brownell Landrum, so it's pretty easy to find me on Amazon or wherever, and you can get all my books that way.
Awesome. Excellent. What about social media? If people want to follow you, where do they find you at?
I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. I have, kind of the basics, I guess.
Excellent. Well, do you have any final words for our multiverse?
For your multiverse is it's just, if there's nothing else you remember from this, well, basically two things. One is there's science here, and the second is if just try to remember the three P's: peaceful, positive, and purposeful. If you can kind of anchor those, and when next time you make a wish, which we do all the time,
Mhm.
then try to think, okay, how can I make those three P's? And that would be lovely.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Brownell, for spending some time with us and sharing some of your really intense and awesome ideas, thought provoking, and also might just help make the world a little bit better place to be. So keep fighting the good fight,
Thank you.
and I'm sure we'll talk again sometime.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.